An inspired life is one aligned with your highest purpose for being on this planet. To serve your highest purpose, first, you need to recognize and develop your inner light. And second, share your light with creation so that it can serve and guide others. What is inspiration? While you experience yourself as a person in the physical reality, a non-physical part of you exists in a higher dimension. We can call that part your higher self. A barrier remains between you and your higher self so that you can identify with and experience physical reality completely. This barrier is sometimes called the veil. While this barrier anchors you in physical reality, your higher self still communicates with you. This communication appears as inspiration. While you may think of inspiration as your own thoughts, they originate in a higher, non-physical dimension and are received by the physical brain. Understanding the evolution of your consciousness. As we have mentioned in other videos, the purpose of human life is the evolution of consciousness. There are two significant markers in this journey to higher consciousness. The first marker is evolving past egocentrism. Before evolving beyond egocentrism, consciousness remains confined within the narrow world of ego. This world is driven by the biological and social programming of survival, security, and stability. At this stage, consciousness is preoccupied with me and mine, the constant drama of what one wants, how to get it, and the emotions that result from this drama. Egocentrism is not only of the physical domain. In the spiritual domain, egocentrism shows up as the need to uphold your spiritual views as superior and to impose them on others. When you evolve past egocentrism, your consciousness begins to focus on more significant matters. You begin to ask, who am I really? Beyond the biological and social programming. Seeking answers begins your spiritual journey. As you search deeper, you understand that your individual consciousness is part of a larger consciousness. This is where you begin to ask, what is my purpose? And lastly, how do I serve? It is worth discussing the social programming that keeps humanity stuck in egocentrism. If you look at the life cycle of a modern human being, it has three broad stages. It is important to see these three stages as parts of a larger picture. The first stage is schooling, which takes up roughly 1/4 of our lives. The next is employment and relationships, which takes up the next half. And finally, retirement, which takes up the final quarter. If you consider the larger context, what are these three phases about? The answer is that they are about you serving an economic purpose as a consumer. If you look closely at the first phase of this life cycle, what is the goal of schooling? Unfortunately, the answer is to produce workers who can participate in the economic system. This is hardly inspiring. Instead of learning about humanity, our true nature, and how to serve, this foundational stage is devoted chiefly to gaining skills to get a job. Based on the underpinning, the next stage, employment and relationships, becomes a complex struggle. We seek employment, whether from someone else or by being self-employed, to achieve economic flexibility. Sadly, our hard-earned financial resources are then spent in an endless cycle of consumption. During this stage, we are also biologically programmed to find companionship. However, our partners have also been trained to be consumers. When you find a partner, there is a strong cultural conditioning to consume together and seek the traditional trophies of the modern dream, clothes, cars, houses, and so on. This is hardly a fulfilling life, because it's devoid of any inherent meaning. This is why, during the midpoint of this stage, people often undergo a midlife crisis. It's often an opportunity to wake up from the dream of cultural conditioning and ask deeper questions about our purpose. Spiritually, This is a way that our higher self and the universe try to nudge us toward our purpose for being on this planet. Often, this leads to a spiritual awakening. The last quarter of life, retirement, ends up being the worst phase for most people. Our consumerist culture keeps pointing people away from the reality of mortality and discourages us from seeking a higher purpose. People in this phase are programmed to want to feel and look younger. And those with money do so by getting sucked into plastic surgery, expensive cars, more ownership of property, and finding younger partners. Now, you might ask, well, what else is there? Are there any models of living which align with higher wisdom? In fact, there is such a system that existed in India during the Vedic times. This is the ashram system of life, which is aligned with natural evolution of life energies. In this system, life is divided into 4 quarters. In the first quarter, known as brahmacharya, you learn from spiritual masters about the nature of reality, your purpose, and how to follow that purpose while being in harmony with creation. Often, this learning happened at gurukuls, which were residences of masters. Energetically, this is a phase of raw energy. This energy needs to be channeled and molded through learning. The second quarter, known as grihastha, literally means one who is situated in family life. In this phase, you fulfill your purpose as a householder by serving duties of raising a family. The second phase of life is still a phase of high physical energy and relatively low wisdom. This is also a phase of strong biological energy of sexuality. These energies need to be guided so that you can explore essential aspects of human existence while learning to love and care for family members. The third phase, known as vanaprastha, literally means going to the forest. This is the revolutionary idea that makes this system transformative. In this phase, you leave your grown children behind and go to the forest to serve the larger community. This marks a natural evolution from serving a smaller family to a bigger family. In this phase, you may teach students, devote yourself to spiritual practices, and acquire more wisdom. The third phase is when biological energy begins to decline, but you have high wisdom from learning and life experience. In this phase, it's important to focus on using your wisdom to serve the greater good. The last phase, called sannyasa, means renunciation. In this phase, you would leave all worldly responsibilities behind and focus solely on enlightenment. In this last phase, which is just before your incarnation ends, you have the least amount of physical energy. Here, it is best to do spiritual work and practices. One of the greatest takeaways from the ashram system is that your purpose is different based on your stage of life. In the first phase, your purpose is to learn and grow. This is done by focusing on studies. In the next phase, your purpose is to love and care for those closest to you, your family. This is time to explore what the world has to offer and also to gather wisdom. In the third phase of your life, your purpose is service. In this phase, let go of limited concerns for yourself and your immediate family, and serve your larger family, humanity. In the last phase of your life, your purpose is to make spiritual effort to attain enlightenment. Let's do an exercise to apply what you have learned so far. For this exercise, grab a pen and paper and write down the answers to the following questions. First, based on the stage of your life you are in, what is your purpose? And second, how can you serve this purpose? Pause this video to write down the answers. Once done, play it to continue. Of the 2 significant markers on the journey to higher consciousness, we have discussed how evolving past egocentrism is the first marker toward living an inspired life. The second marker is to learn to trust yourself and the universe. As mentioned, inspiration is simply communication from your higher self. But your ability to act on that inspiration is limited by your level of trust. As human beings, our core biological need for security and stability creates an invisible prison of a comfort zone around us. We do not grow when we stay within it, and hence, our higher self tries to get us out of it. An inspired life can only be lived outside our comfort zone. The journey to higher consciousness is essentially a journey of trading up. At each stage of our evolution, we outgrow old patterns of thinking and need to exchange them for higher patterns. In particular, we need to trade security for meaning. This may mean letting go of a job that provides financial security, but no meaning, and living a simpler lifestyle. Next, we need to trade idle comforts for growth. We cannot waste time on passive entertainment and idle socializing. Instead, time has to be invested in growth. Lastly, our personal agenda has to be traded for a higher plan. This requires recognizing that our personal agenda originates from a limited perspective of ego, not from our higher self. These trades, while intuitive, go against our deep egocentric patterns of preservation, and hence they cause fear and immobilization. How to develop trust. As we think deeper about living an inspired life, the core question becomes, how do we develop trust in ourselves and in the universe? Here's how. First, acquire spiritual knowledge, because trust is founded upon knowledge. If you study the mechanism of reincarnation, and particularly pre-birth planning, you understand that your inspiration is part of an agreement with the universe. This agreement was put in place before you incarnated, and the universe is here to support your path. There is no reason to be afraid. Second, trust is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. The problem with most people is not the lack of inspiration. The problem is lack of action. Act on the inspiration that you already have, to the best of your ability, and you will have more. Being the wise teacher that the universe is, it gives you small bits of inspiration before it can give you larger ones. When you use the small pieces to live an inspired life, the universe will open more doors for you, so you can make bigger contributions. When you take this journey, it's imperative to be willing to make mistakes and look foolish in the moment. This requires you to grow beyond your own opinion, as well as the opinions of others. Opinions are subjective, and thus have no inherent merit. Why be constrained by them? In the larger scheme of things, you will notice that there are no mistakes. What appears as a mistake today will turn out to be the intermediate step you need to take to make it to your eventual goal. Let's end this video with a few practices that you can cultivate for living an inspired life. The first is to have a daily spiritual practice. A daily spiritual practice puts you in touch with your higher self and makes communication easier. The second is the practice of 7 inspired hours. Living an inspired life requires change, which is scary. The bigger the change, the more fear it produces in the egoic self, and hence, the smaller the probability of change. The way to break this cycle is to start with a small change, one that does not scare you that much. Start with devoting an hour a day to something that inspires you. If you do this consistently, that gives you 7 hours to focus on what inspires you every week. While it may not sound much, tremendous progress can be made if this time is wisely invested. As an exercise, write down the answers to 2 questions. 1. How can you free up an hour every day to focus on your higher purpose? 2. How can you best use 7 hours a week to make progress on what truly inspires you?